Three, two, one. Hey friends, Janky here, and welcome back to the lab. I have a sweet game to show you guys today. It is Hover, Revolt of the Gamers. I don't know. It's a massively multiplayer online RPG kind of thing, developed by Midgar Studio and Fusty Game, published by Playdius Entertainment, Plug-in Digital, and The Sidekicks. It's all about that parkour, baby, sweet child. I don't know. Experience the thrills of a fast-paced single and multiplayer parkour game, join the rebellion, and deride the security forces of an anti-leisure tyranny. Rise up to the many challenges of a futuristic open world. Assemble your team, enhance your gear, and perform incredible tricks and combos. I'm excited to get started, so without further ado, let me fade away so we can get started with this game. Okay, so where to even begin with this game? I think I'll just start with the story and then work forward from there. That sounds like a good plan. So, like I said in the intro, you play as a parkour rebel working to save your city from the grip of an evil, polluting businessman dictator who has outlawed any form of fun. Luckily, there's an underground rebellion of hardcore gamers who also, and kind of improbably, are gifted with the most amazing freerunning skills you have ever seen in your life. You were created as a clone to basically have fun and join the rebellion. The tutorial is you escaping from the abandoned cloning factory while also learning the basics of amazing athleticism. What you see here is the laboratory in the tutorial. So I will say one of the things that I like about the lab, and this will come up a little bit later when I talk about aesthetics and design, is that the colors in here are muted and then they have the bright pop of orange. That is something that the city doesn't have, and it is, my goodness, insane. But basically the way that you interact with everything, like you can see me doing here, is you scan things. That's basically your interact button. That's how you talk to people, that's how you interact with switches, that's how you do everything. Now this next section is teaching us about jumping. The controls are pretty simple. They're just kind of a little poorly explained. You might see there that the way that they're explaining it is in terms of joystick 0, 1, 2, and 3, which I think are supposed to represent the buttons, because this is actually an Xbox and PlayStation controller supported game. So maybe that's why they did it that way. I don't know, but it kind of gets unclear. But at the bottom, they explain it in terms of buttons. Anyway, that section was all about jumping. Basically, the longer you hold the jump button, the longer and farther you jump, which is nice. This section is all about grinding. Now, grinding is actually very useful because you can use it to, first of all, score sweet points, and also build up energy. Now, you don't see it in this part, you see it later in the game when we're out in the city, but whenever you get energy, it energizes the suit you're wearing, so you actually run faster and you jump farther and all this other cool stuff. Also, you get sweet style points whenever you hit X while you're jumping. Now, this section shows off a really cool mechanic in the game. It's called Rewind, which they're explaining, but I heard them explain this once before this, so I kind of skipped through it. Basically, what happens is it takes you back along the neon trail that you leave. It doesn't rewind time, which they're very clear to point out, because time is really important later in the game because most of the missions are timed. But if you're falling off a building, you can hit it real quick to get back up to where you were, which is very useful because you fall off buildings a lot in this game. This next mechanic that they're going to show us here is the graffiti mechanic. You use that basically against the corporate people who are putting up anti-leisure or like anti-gaming posters around the city. You spray paint over it, which is pretty fun to do. And you'll see that again a little later. Anyway, that pretty much covers everything that was going on in the tutorial. There's also some stuff about like security bots and that. I kind of skipped past that part. Oh, I guess there is one more thing right here, which is the chests. So you find these hidden across the city. Basically, they have power-ups in them. We call them chips in this game, but essentially, they're just upgrades to your character. And the more you level up, the more slots you unlock to put chips in, which is a menu you'll see here in just a second. You can also earn these chips from completing missions around the world. Basically, a whole bunch of different things that you can do, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. As you level up, you unlock more of those slots. To equip it, you just click a slot and then pick the chip that you want. Right now, I only have the one, which boosts, I think it was jump and something else. Basically, every one of these chips is able to boost some ability, whether it be jumping, grinding, acceleration, speed, all sorts of things. And you can upgrade your character by a certain percentage as you go along. There's some really cool chips you find later that also give you pets and like really crazy upgrades, which are awesome. Now this is the first view of the city, and you might see what I mean. Talking aesthetics and design now, you'll see that honestly, the city kind of hurts your eyes if you stare at it for too long. It's like if Sunset Overdrive and Wizard 101 had a child that was sprinkled with just a little bit of Telltale, this is the city you would get from that. That being said, I actually really like the design of the city. It's just, particularly in the upper levels, which you'll see a little bit later here, it's so bright that looking at it for an extended period of time, I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is so much to look at, so much. And it's so densely packed in there too. There's so much going on throughout this city at any given time. Cars moving, hovercrafts moving, other players just running through the city because of course this is an online game. And just all sorts of things going on that it kind of hurts. It kind of hurts to look at it for a while. This is the other thing about this city, is that it's mostly vertical. So, I mean, there is space to run horizontally too, but a lot of the city is built up, which works for a parkour game, right? Except it's so hard to move between levels because there's no like conventional means of transport. You'll notice like right there I used a jumping pad, which is basically the easiest way to get from level to level, but there aren't a lot of ramps or stairs leading between the levels. There are ramps and stairs, but they just don't go from one level to another, which kind of sucks because it means that you just have to like jump your way to victory and climb and grind and do all these other things before you reach the next level. I'm getting some sweet style points right here. The other thing too is it's just hard that it's all vertical because it's you get stuck and then you can't like, you just, whenever we're going on missions, right? Like this part right here, I am just trying to get to the next mission. And to do it, I have to do all these like ridiculous wall hopping jumps and like one after another to even get to the mission that I'm trying to go to. The other thing you have to watch out for are those security bots, which are the red lights on the ceiling. Well, those are the cameras. And then there are also drones that you'll see a little bit later. They kind of suck, and you kind of have to avoid those, but we'll talk about those whenever they come up. The nice thing is you don't actually sustain any fall damage, so you can fall from literally the top of the city to the bottom and not have to deal with fall damage, which is nice, but it also kind of sucks. Oh, this is one of the most ridiculous things I did. I actually found out that there was a better way to get up there later, but this is what I'm talking about. There's a learning curve early in the game trying to move between these levels, and this was easily the most ridiculous thing that I did, which was I hopped up on these pedestal things and then I hopped across to that elevator there so I could get up to the next mission. It was crazy. The other thing too, and you'll see it coming up on the missions here, is why it's also really hard that this is like an open world parkour game with all these levels and it's so easy to drop off, which is with these missions, you have to move from one end of the city to the other. And if you fall too far between the levels, then it's almost impossible to complete the mission. Granted, this was actually the first mission I did. This was one of the missions that's the delivery style. So basically, you have to take an object, in this case, this guy's pet, and you have to deliver it to the show on the other side of town, the pet show on the other side of town. This first run is an absolute failure, just abject failure. I was just trying to figure out how to even go about this. And I actually run into a security bot, and you'll see what they do there. They put up those walls, and then sometimes they also summon security drones that will immobilize you for a short amount of time. It kind of sucks. You never actually die in this game, for the record, but you can get slowed down. And because every mission is timed, that kind of sucks. But that's what I'm talking about right there. So I just fell 2-3 stories almost all the way to the ground. And I try to use the jump pads to get back up, but at that point, I'm already so far down toward the ground, it doesn't even help me. And I fall the rest of the way here. So it's like, it's nice that it's open world, and if it was just going around and parkouring, that'd be really fun. But because you don't have any kind of guided path from one end to the other, you just have to find the best way. I did end up finding out later, this was actually the run that I made it, and I found out after this run that there was an easier way to go about this, but I didn't know that at the time because I was still so new to the game, and this was one of the first missions I did, so I went like some insane route, which technically worked, but I just kind of wish that maybe these missions were a little more guided so I don't do exactly what I did here, which was take the most roundabout way you possibly could to get to the end of the mission. Yeah, I summoned like a security bot, it's chasing after me, it almost zaps me here, and then I sneak around, I end up right back where I started. It was crazy. Like, you run into, oh my god, I can't even. It just gives me flashbacks watching this. I guess it would, wouldn't it? Because I'm watching it. Anyway, the point is that eventually I make it to the end, but it's just one of those things that's like, you have to make it from one end to the other. Why? The other thing I will say though, is that there is a lot of cool stuff going on. There are some other missions you can do that are really cool. One of them, later, whenever you unlock the sewers, which is the Resistance hideout, it's called GamerBall, which is more of like forum basketball, really, is kind of what it's like. That one's fun to play, although I didn't totally understand the rules of it. And then you can also do races, which is most of what my footage here is. I absolutely love doing the races. They're so much fun. And I think one is coming up here in the next thing, maybe? Basically, the reason that I like them so much is because the path is so much more guided through the environment whenever you're doing it. Yeah, I accidentally hit the back button there. Style points. But the thing is, whenever you come across a section, maybe once or twice where you have to just sort of figure out how to parkour it, that's fine. I'm cool with that. That's awesome. Like this part, the rail grind, I love that. But at least I had kind of a path that I could follow, and it was a little easier to figure out what exactly I was supposed to be doing. Whereas with the other stuff, I was just like, I was lost. I wasn't sure what to do, and honestly, the races were my favorite part of this entire game. They were just, I love the races. Do them all. It's great. The other fun thing about the races is that a lot of times in the later races, I don't think this is one of them, but in the later races, you actually get taken through a lot of heavily secured areas in the world. So you have to deal with all these security bots while you're running the races, and that can really affect things too. Now in this race, I'm actually running against someone. This was the easiest race. I think this was the starter race, so you never see them. But in the later races, you actually were legitimately competing against a computer player, and it actually got to be pretty fun. Usually you had to run the race once or twice before you actually knew what you were doing and where you were going. But yeah, they were easily my favorite part of this entire game, was running these races. So that was an awesome feature, and I was so glad that they had it. You will notice though sometimes during this footage that it kind of lags out. I think that part of that is because this is an online game, and because it's an online game, it kind of, you know, that's just kind of the nature of online games, is that they can be kind of laggy. And I don't know, the one problem that I have with that is that because this is a game all about parkour, and because it's about being able to time things right and dodge through security and all this other stuff, it might be a lot to ask of a game online like this to not be laggy, especially when it's like massively multiplayer like this one is. I mean, you see other players jumping through. Basically anyone who has a trail following them, basically anyone that's like moving, is another player. So I understand a certain amount of lag whenever it comes to that sort of thing, but it's just, I don't know. Maybe you guys agree with me, maybe you don't. I'd love to hear about it in the comments, but if you're going to have a game that's about parkour, you want it to run smooth, because if it doesn't run smooth, then you might miss a jump or a grind or something, and especially during these timed missions, that's a huge thing to miss if you don't get that perfectly timed. So I don't know, I think it just kind of it's one of the things that needs tweaking in this game. There are other missions too. Basically the other missions are kind of associated with the rebels. So basically any mission, oh actually I'm gonna come back to that. This mission was a later delivery mission where I was actually good and understood what I was doing. This one is one of the missions called There and Back. So basically, well, okay, I call it There and Back. What you had to do was go and pick up something and then deliver it back to the person. So in this case, you're picking up a sushi box, I think. Yeah. So you have to run to the restaurant, pick up the sushi box, and then take it back to the person who was asking for it. Now, by this time, I had been playing the game a while, so I kind of understood some of the routes in the game. I will say that some of the other missions, they felt like they couldn't be done by one person, and I think some of the missions can be done by multiple players if you get other players to participate. The big thing with one of them was back at the sushi restaurant, you can do something for the owner where basically you throw out old sushi and the garbage cans are scattered all around the city, but the time it takes to get to one garbage can and get back is basically half the time he gives you. So I have to imagine you just have to get 3 other players, or 2 other players, and then you all grab bad sushi and run to the trash cans. That's the only way I can possibly imagine that mission working. I don't know. But that's just another example of a mission. Now, what I was saying a moment ago was some of the other missions in the game. Isn't that a beautiful view of the city? Beautiful vistas. You basically do missions for the rebellion, which are more like collection missions. So the one that I'm about to do here on accident is whenever I jump off this building, I accidentally break a propaganda sign, which is one of the things you have to do. So there are these propaganda signs scattered throughout the city. You have to break them because they're propagating anti-leisure attitude. So you have to hit them with a certain amount of speed in order to break them, which is what makes it hard because a lot of them are up on walls and things. So that's one of the missions. This is another one where basically there are these spy drones flying around the city and you have to collect them. And the way that you collect them is you kind of follow them on an obstacle course kind of thing, where you have to hit them so many times before you actually take them. And then this is where that graffiti comes in. So around the city there are these anti-leisure posters, and you have to spray paint them in order to beat this mission. Now, I didn't find all of them. Honestly, most of the collection missions I kind of left by the wayside because you really have to scour the city to find them. And as I've said before, this city has a lot to it. So to find specific things, it's kind of like, I don't know. There is one other thing that you can do, which is collect gamer girls, which are these things that are scattered around the city. They're basically Game Boys, and you can collect those for experience points as well. Speaking briefly about the danger factor of the game, there really is none. Like I said, the security bots just momentarily stun you and scold you if you get caught. They're pretty easy to avoid, and you can fall from just about any building and not sustain fall damage. I think this kind of speaks to the age group that this game is built for. As I'm sure you can tell, I think it's more for a preteen, teenage crowd. Basically someone who wants all the fun of parkour but doesn't have to actually worry about, like, dying in the game if you miss a jump or something like that. So just a quick word on the quest scanning before we go. The quest scanning basically tracks you to whatever quest is closest. Unless you're running a race like this, then it will actually track you to the next race. But I just wanted to mention that real quick before getting around to my final thoughts. So what are my final thoughts on this game? Well, I think the game creates a fun, lighthearted experience that's a fun way to spend an hour or two. It doesn't draw me in and hold me, except for the racing, which is pretty spectacular, but anytime a game has a parkour mechanic, it kind of makes me feel like a superhero, which I love. The colorful, cartoonish aesthetic is charming, if a bit much to look at, and the story has that vague, green, fun-loving rebels versus evil, cold corporations. It's actually kind of reminiscent of Toontown Online. It's kind of a stock story, but I like it. It's a pretty good story. On the whole, I like this game. I just think that it could do with some post-launch tweaking. With that in mind, let's pull out Janky's experimental scale. I do feel obligated to remind you that this scale is as arbitrary as it is delightful and just my own humble opinion. As I'm sure you recall, there are 5 possible options: smashing success, promising results, more trials needed, revisions required, and acid kid. Based on what I've seen, I'm happy to say that Hover Revolt of the Gamers ranks in at a respectable more trials needed. If you'd like to check out the game yourself, it launched on June 1st on Steam, and if you feel this game deserved a different rank, feel free to leave that in the comments below. But for now, I am going to call this experiment concluded. So, I hope you guys enjoyed yet another Janky's Lab. If you did, you can totally leave those likes down below. Comments, positive or negative, feel free to leave those below as well. But more than anything, I hope you have a lovely day, evening, or whenever you happen to be watching. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this is Janky Shenanigans, signing out. Everything the light touches will one day be yours. Simba. Oh, I just have far too much fun.